If ever your life could be a true crime podcast episode, then this podcast is for you. We're about to embark on a roller coaster of emotions, insights, survival, and stories about escape. So buckle up and let the journey begin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back into the EscapePod. I'm Julie.
I'm Charity.
And we are excited to have a special guest back with us again. Do you want to do the introduction, Miss Charity?
Yes, I would love to introduce Lara Retzel, the Pennington County State's Attorney. Amazing human being. She's super fun. Our last episode with her had a lot of airtime and people really enjoyed it. So we thought we'd bring her in for a little more of a deep dive today. So we're going to do some fun things. We were trying to lighten the mood at first because it was like, you know, there's been a lot of heaviness lately. So thought we would bring her in to kind of share some of those things you just can't make up that she experiences in her world, in her arena, doing the job that she does. And how long have you been involved with the State's Attorney's Office? Overall?
First of all, thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to be here. I have been a prosecutor for like 28 years.
28 years, yeah. So you've seen a lot.
I have seen so many things, and I have such a good ability to block it out and like shut down my memory bank. So it's fun to try to think back on some of those humorous moments.
Yeah.
And also humorous from a prosecutor's perspective is probably not necessarily humorous for other people because it's dark. A lot of my humor is really dark.
Yeah, and it's fine. Like being married to a first responder. You know, actually, in some of the work that we did with IACP, we learned a lot about vicarious trauma, and that's really part of social work too, like what we do here at One Heart, that you see and you're exposed to and you just experience so much of the dark side of humanity.
Yeah.
And we will build these release valves in order to process and deal with that. And a lot of times it's humor. And it's humor that from an outsider looking in that has no experience in that arena might perceive as tasteless or insensitive or whatever. And it's like, hey, you need to understand that they need to do these jobs. These jobs are important.
Yeah.
And these jobs can create that vicarious trauma. And if you do not let that out and process that in some way that can make you continue to deal with it and do those jobs, then the system is going to completely fall apart. So, you know, there's cop humor that some would consider, that went too far. but you know, I would still suggest that maybe it's not far enough considering police suicide rates are amongst the highest in the country. So, you know, it's important. So if you're offended by any of the humor we're going to talk about today, you know, just, hey, take it with a grain of salt. Know that if you're not experienced in that arena, you can always stop listening. That's okay too.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is part of how we process really hard, difficult things. So
Yeah.
I had a prosecutor come into my office just yesterday, and I'm like, how are you doing? And she said, you know, my mental health is suffering a little bit. And I said, well, tell me about that. And she told me about a case that she was working that was just so sad involving a little boy. And she told me about what he was experiencing. And I said, you know, it's important to remember that that's not happening to you. You're going home tonight to a husband that loves you and you have a happy life, and you have to separate the good work you're doing here from your own life.
Yeah.
And I think
so hard,
that's the key. You have to be able to remember that these things that are traumatic and are happening to others are not happening to you. But people have to understand that so many of the first responders that you're talking about, and even prosecutors who are taking cases from those excellent first responders and trying to bring them to and through the criminal justice system and to justice, that ever elusive Lady Justice, we care so deeply about those cases. They become part of us. You know, last night we had this really great event. It was a night of remembrance for homicide victims. And we had a vigil, and it was beautiful. And part of the message that I gave when I talked to them was that you trust us with these cases. You trust us with the lives of your loved ones, and that's so heavy and so important to us. And we're so humbled by that gift.
yeah.
So, yeah, but there are some very, very serious and heavy things that happen at the state's attorney's office. And there are also some moments where we just sit and laugh because we see so many really funny
the
and
wall,
hilarious, just hilarious things too. Just yesterday, one of our young prosecutors had a court trial. It was a speeding ticket. And this person they were fighting their speeding ticket, which you have an absolute right to fight your speeding ticket. And so the woman that was fighting her speeding ticket testified on her own behalf. And initially, she had told the law enforcement officer that pulled her over that the parked car that she had hit pulled right out in front of her.
Oh, wow, that's
The officer had body-worn camera that showed that the car was absolutely stationary and parked.
Was there even a driver in the parked car?
There was no driver in the car. So then her story...
And just to confirm, it was not a self-driving car.
It was not a Tesla.
Okay.
It was not a self-driving car. It was absolutely parked car that she had hit. So her story quickly became, well, then there was a car in the middle of the road that she had swerved to avoid. And then he showed her the body-worn camera again and showed her that there was absolutely not any car in the road that she had
not
swerved.
schizophrenic.
She did not appear to have. She appeared
Okay.
to be a sound mind.
Okay.
Well, so then she comes to the court trial. In her testimony, she has a third story. She takes the stand. She raises her hand. She swears under oath in front of the judge that there was a car way down the road that only she could see. And that car stopped suddenly and outran 3 people.
Oh,
And the people ran towards her. And she was so startled by this bizarre act of people running towards her in the road that she swerved and hit the car. And the officer testified under oath that that was absolutely not what happened, that he had been
so
there.
the officer just happened to be following
Yeah.
at the time?
Yeah,
so
just
just
saw.
right place, right time, was able to witness everything.
Absolutely not a car. No people got out and ran towards her. Didn't happen. And the judge, of course, found her guilty of, I think it was reckless driving or careless driving, something like that, because she hit a parked car.
Yeah.
So the judge found her guilty and gave her the standard $134 fine, and away she would go, right? Ma'am, you're ordered to pay your $134 fine. She said, well, F you, Your Honor.
Ooh.
I will not be paying any such fine.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
And judge,
Oh, my.
very, very strong
Oh,
but kind magistrate judge said, ma'am, you're not allowed to curse in my courtroom. You're going to pay your $134 fine at the clerk of courts, and you're going to be on your way. And she said, there is not a GD chance in hell that I'm going to pay that fine, and you can't make me.
oh.
But she said the swear words that I'm not going to say for your gentle listeners. And she grabbed her walker. Here's the kicker.
She doesn't need a walk.
83 years old.
Oh, what?
83 years old. She grabs her walker.
I was picturing a young person.
I was too.
Of course you were. That's what makes the story so good. She grabs her walker. She
was not
turns
expecting
around,
a twist.
and she turns around over her shoulder. And the judge looked at her and she goes, I will hold you in contempt and throw you in jail if you swear at me one more time, ma'am.
Sounds like an SNL skit.
And as she's grabbing her walker and slowly walking away, this 83-year-old woman looks over her shoulder and she said, I effing dare you to throw me in jail, Your Honor. And she walks out of the courtroom.
Did she go to jail?
She did not go to jail. The judge said she could just barely hold it together, not laughing at this 83-year-old woman that is probably not going to pay that $134 fine, but it's going to be another one of those great stories that we can all tell.
But do we talk to DMV? Should she be on the
Right.
road? Are there
That's
other
the
factors
kicker.
at play here? Like, is the public safe?
Right, and should she have that driver's license?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Every day we come away with something like that.
That was funny.
That's a good one.
Okay.
And it's just yesterday.
Keep going, Laura. I'm loving it already.
When I talk to community members, sometimes depending on who's in the room, if we have bankers in the room, we'll talk about our One Heart guests, a number of whom open their first savings accounts while they're on our campus. And so we'll talk about that. And one of the things that doesn't just have to be in front of insurance agents, but we're always like, people come here without valid driver's license and often without insurance, and we're going to help them get those things. And they don't get the parking pass without valid insurance, or they might get the parking pass, but we're going to say, you can't be driving that vehicle without insurance. And so they'll work to get the insurance. And I'm always like, you all can thank us for this. I don't say it like that, but I say, isn't that better for all of us? It's better for all of us that they have insurance, right?
Yes.
So, oh, goodness gracious. That's a fantastic story.
Well, and
I love it.
That was just yesterday. When I was preparing to come here, I could think of a million others. And that was literally just yesterday. But most of the fun happens in magistrate court because it's just a mass of humanity coming in and out. And a lot of the fun comes in what people wear to court.
Okay.
It used to be that people dressed up for court.
Yeah.
Now we kind of keep track of all the funny things that people wear to court and how their outfits match up to their charge. So a lot of times
You have a matrix.
a lot of times when people are charged with marijuana, they're wearing something that refers to marijuana culture. So we have a whole list of things that people wear that reference marijuana culture, and we keep track of whether the judge picks up on it, because a lot of times they do. These judges are smart.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll comment on it. They'll be like,
Yeah.
I noticed your marijuana leaf sweatshirt. Could you take that off and turn it inside out? Because you're here for a possession of marijuana charge. But I think our favorite one, the one that I made a note that I wanted to tell you about, was a guy who was in court for minor consumption. So that's, drinking alcohol. Yep. Yeah. And then the other charge was obstructing justice. So that's usually being a jerk to law enforcement, being rude to law enforcement in some way. And his shirt said, instant a-hole.
Oh, just add alcohol.
Just add alcohol.
I just saw that shirt. I'm like, I just saw that shirt on somebody.
He wore it to court. And those were his charges.
And how did that go over in court?
Well, it's like an admission, right?
This
It's
is
just
also
like
a lack of self-awareness or a deep level of self-awareness.
I think it's like a guilty plea right there on his shirt.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, what? This isn't my shirt. I don't know how this got there.
Yeah. That was our favorite.
That's a good one.
That is a good one.
Kind of thinking again about things people wear, and this is more of a story from law enforcement, but it ended up being funny at trial too. So the call to law enforcement was a woman who had stolen a bunch of things and taken off on a moped.
Like shoplifting from a retail store?
Shoplifting. Okay. And then they tried to stop her, and she takes off on a moped.
Was it a fast moped?
This is not a high-speed chase, right? So they're chasing her on a moped, and they chase her down, in front of the Prairie Market, and then, they're past the post office, and then the chase goes on and ends up on foot and up through Star Village. But the funny part of the story is that the woman is shedding clothes as she's riding the moped and running up M Hill. So the police report reads, as we pass the Prairie Market, she throws a high heel at me. As we pass the post office, she throws her other high heel. So she's pitching her high heel at the police officer at the Prairie Market, and she's taking off the other high heel and throwing it at the police car as they pass the post office. And she's taking off pretty soon she's taking off her hair. And throwing it at the police officer, and she's taking pretty soon you find out that it's not a woman at all.
Okay.
So I don't know if maybe she was incognito.
That was her disguise.
That was her disguise.
To not get busted shoplifting.
Yeah.
But when you shed your disguise in front of law enforcement, it doesn't work.
It makes for a really good
I was really trying to picture someone in a moped in heels, so
I know.
that's a pretty funny picture.
You have to really visualize this low-speed chase.
I'm picturing red stilettos.
They were, and they were high heels. This is a very exaggerated, like this person, when they were imagining what a woman would wear, they were really like going all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you have to play out the whole shoplifting in this outfit and the low-speed chase with the moped, and then discarding the disguise.
Did we have a stuffed bra?
The whole thing.
Were there baseballs or oranges? Like how dangerous
that could
these
be
projectiles? Because baseballs
really
could be
useful. In trying to elude.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my goodness. So man dressed as a woman and thinking that's his way out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What did he steal?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
I don't even remember.
That's not
What
the
was
important.
what was
that's
the
not the
value
important
though?
part of
Well,
the
I'm
story.
like, was it value a lot of like high dollar or
I don't remember.
Don't remember?
I just remember how funny it was. And it was all on video, of course. Everything's on video now. So we have so much fun. We have these attorney meetings and we play body-worn cameras for each other at these attorney meetings. And it's just like the highlight of the day. What hilarious thing will we see? So another one that was really funny is, we find drugs everywhere. Like if there's a problem in Rapid City, it's methamphetamine, right? We've talked about that.
this.
It's just like drugs everywhere. So in one of our cases, and this went to trial, it was a big drug bust. Police pull a car over. It's like it happens time after time, all day long in Rapid City, right? Very stereotypical story. They pull over a car. The car is full of people. There's drugs all over the car. Well, there's a particular baggie that they find in the car. And on the body-worn camera, there's you can see the police officers. They open the baggie, and it's full of the the white crystal substance. And you can hear the officers. They're like, oh yeah, there's a whole lot of drugs in here. They're like, oh, look at it, and they show each other, and they're like, look at that. That's a quantity. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of meth right there. Like that's going to be a big bust. It's a big bust. They like make a big deal about this particular baggie. Well, sure as anything, comes back from testing.
Bath salt?
Himalayan salt?
No, it's even better than that. It's glazed sugar from a donut.
No way.
Yeah. And it's mostly funny because it's cops, right? And the whole cop donut connection. Like, if anybody should catch a donut, right? It's cops.
Do you have a sound effect that goes? I don't know. Let's hit a couple and see.
Yeah.
That's a clapping one. Nope.
Nope.
That's a good. That one did it. Okay.
That one's pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, there were other drugs in the car. Like it was a legit drug bust, but that particular baggie that they were so excited about.
Like, okay, question. Why do you have a baggie of?
I don't know. Maybe they were saving a donut for later. I don't know.
So the donut maybe had been in there?
Oh, there definitely.
So it was
yeah,
more residue.
Yeah,
It wasn't
was
like
what was
full
left of the
baggie.
donut.
It was what was left of the donut.
Okay.
It was donut residue.
I was picturing a baggie full of this
Yeah, no, it was,
crystalline substance, and like, why do you?
it was
Are
definitely
you dipping? Like what are you
donut
doing?
residue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Donut residue. That's a new one.
I
That's pretty funny.
love it.
Yeah.
Classic.
It's a good one.
So what kind of things have you been most surprised by, like in 28 years of prosecuting these cases that you just still shake your head at? Like this is fiction, but it's not fiction. This happened in real life.
Gosh. I think it's how hard people will make excuses to get out of trouble, and the lies that they will tell law enforcement to get out of trouble. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't stop. Just the lack of accountability just doesn't end. And, for me, I personally prosecute very, very high-level crimes. So, the stories I've told you have been funny, low-level crimes. I mean, my personal experiences have been, like, in really high-profile murder cases. And I think that's when the stories become ones that shock the conscience. So, I mean, any other stories I would tell would be more shocking. Yeah. Like the one that comes to mind when I think of what shocks the conscience the most is I'm sure you've heard of Amanda Cower. It's a huge case that I prosecuted. It's the one that has the Snapped episode based on it. She executed her husband. Mm-hmm. It was a domestic violence case. It's it's a really, really tragic story of very stereotypical domestic violence situation, but the twist is, that it's a female offender. And I think some people still are surprised when a woman can be the predominant aggressor in a domestic violence situation. But in that story, the shocker is, and it's even in the Snapped episode, is after she executes her husband, she packs up the kids and she goes out for pancakes.
We covered this case.
Yeah. I mean, in that moment, like if you just let your mind hang on that moment, like think of like a true cold-blooded killer. Like who
That's
could
no conscience. That's just like, okay, job done. Task. That's first on my to-do
okay,
list for
but
the day.
there was another twist. She shot him. He didn't die right away. She took the kids to breakfast. She went back, realized he was not dead, shot him again.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's called follow through.
Yeah. Please. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my Lord!
Nothing if
How many?
not persistent.
So 2 kids.
Right, 2 kids. So, but
Wow.
the idea of having shot someone and then just pack it up and go out for breakfast and eat breakfast. I mean, for me, that
maybe it
just
works up an
is-
appetite. I mean, I've never murdered anybody.
Right?
Never.
No, it was a doozy.
Yeah.
I think I don't know what type of rules. I don't think we were breaking any rules, but wouldn't you know, Lara, maybe the diner owner gave us the footage of her eating breakfast.
Really? Oh, I would love to see that. I never got that.
Yeah, I think we had that, or the reporter saw it, and yeah, it was wild. I would agree. That's one where you just can't believe. It's like, what?
So was it a true case of snapping? Had she been a victim of domestic abuse, or
No.
was she just like, for whatever reason, needed him out of the picture?
Yeah, no, the premise of snapped is really like someone who's like been abused and in the moment snaps. And that really didn't fit the profile
Okay,
of
that's what I was wondering.
that show. This was absolutely premeditated murder.
Was there insurance policy, or what was
there
the-
was. He was in the Air Force, so there was all the Air Force benefits that she received. He had adopted her children, so there's all that Social Security money that she was going to be receiving. And, she had a new boyfriend. I mean, there was a million motives that she
So the
had.
typical trope, we've got checking
Yeah.
all the boxes. We just have
Yeah.
to get the husband out of the way. That is just disturbing.
But in the concept of strange but true, or just like shocking things that come up in the world of the state's attorney's office, that one just always pops into my mind.
Usually, though, we hear it's the man,
Right.
like trying to get rid of the wife so that he can, upgrade to a newer model, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just always comes to mind.
Yeah, the pancakes put that one over the edge.
Yep.
Yeah, that puts it high up on the list of strange but true.
It really does.
Yeah. Okay,
Wow.
now you have a case you wanted to bring up with her.
Yeah, because this one got me fired up.
Oh, she was really fired up. I walked into her office when she was writing it one day, and I was like, "Woo, the redhead is out in full force."
Yeah, Charity fired up is something to be seen.
Isn't it, though? It's going to be kind of fun.
Oh, not for me. It's fun for everybody else, unless you're on the receiving end of it. Okay, so this happened very recently. So it's about a young woman by the name of Crystal Kaiser, and this is in Kenosha, Wisconsin, so around the Milwaukee area. So starting in 2018, she was 16 at the time. She was sexually assaulted and sex trafficked by a man more than twice her age. His name is Randall Volar. I mean, and it's the typical thing, gifts and money to lure them in, make them feel like, oh, this is special, and then in exchange for the assault, and then began selling her to other men, other people, could be other non-men, who knows. But what's more, he would videotape the assaults. And so it's possible he was also profiting from access to the videos. That's my conjecture, not anything that I've seen documented. And this happened to her for more than a year. What I do remember in some of the research is, and I'll probably get to it later, but this is me going off-road because I do this frequently. The situation she was in, being in poverty, she was providing for her younger siblings. And so the cash and gifts of this arrangement were to help buy food for her younger siblings and that kind of a thing. So fast forward to now, she's 24 years old. She's sentenced to 11 years in jail for shooting him when she was 17. So it took that long to get through the system. She accepted this as a plea deal in order to avoid a life sentence in Wisconsin. And what happened that night is she had a boyfriend. She'd been fighting with the boyfriend. She needed to get away from him, so she called this man, Randall, because she didn't know who else to call. And he sent an Uber for her. She gets there. He starts massaging her leg. And do I have a picture? did I get a picture? Oh, dang it. I'm sorry. Julie, you would have loved it. Yeah, anyway, so he begins massaging her leg. She refuses him. And then she claims he pinned her to the floor and tried to hold her there against her will and force himself on her, and she'd had enough. She claims she was somehow able to retrieve a gun from her purse and shot him. And then, cherry on top, she lit his house on fire, stole his BMW, and peaced out. So during the investigation, it was discovered that he abused about a dozen black girls. All appeared to be underage. The crazy thing, this is what got me fired up, is 4 months before he was killed, he was arrested on charges of sexual assault and released the same day. Because he was white is why some people are claiming he was released, and the victims were all black. But, again, who knows? But this is the first time I have seen ACEs, adult adverse childhood experiences, brought up in a case. And so I thought, we're finally like our discussion last time about trauma being accepted as a victim or freezing as a trauma response. And now ACEs were brought up in this court case. So we're making progress. But Crystal's defense attorney asked for a more forgiving sentence, talking about her ACEs and the effects of trafficking and how it impacts black women specifically. And some states have implemented what they call an affirmative defense law. Are you familiar with that?
Well, South Dakota has one.
Okay. And so in this case, it's protecting victims from some charges, including like prostitution or theft, if those actions were a result of being trafficked. So we do have those laws?
Well, not exactly like that, but we have immunity. We have self-defense immunity from prosecution when you have killed someone in defense of yourself. So finish your story and then I'll tell you more.
Okay. So in 2022, Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled Crystal could use, so this was the first hill to climb, that they could use this affirmative defense in this case. And accordingly, she used evidence that proved her abuse at the time of the crime. So in her case, is your opinion whether or not she should be immune to prosecution?
It sounds very much like she could be immune from prosecution if she had committed that offense in South Dakota. So immunity from prosecution in a stand your ground state or in a situation where someone is committing a felony against you, like it sounds like she could argue, she would absolutely have a claim of immunity in South Dakota. So in 2023, we revised all of our self-defense laws so that if you are in your home and someone is committing a felony against you or your person or property are at risk, you can stand your ground and defend yourself against that. But also it would exist if you weren't in your home and you believed your life was in danger or someone was committing a felony against you, you could stand your ground and defend yourself. But I think even just using general principles of self-defense, she would have an excellent claim because you just use a reasonable person standard when you're thinking about self-defense. So knowing what she knew and being who she was, did she think she was going to be able to escape that situation? She'd just been raped. She'd been sex trafficked. Was she ever going to be able to avoid that situation? Was she ever going to be able to get away from him? He's committing not just the felony of rape, but I assume that sex trafficking is a felony in that state. It is in almost all states. If she would have had the right expert witness to say that her, being who she was, knowing what she knew about her situation, would she ever be free of that? Would she ever be safe from that? The answer was probably no. And it reminds me of a case that we prosecuted in South Dakota that was one of the most difficult cases that we were ever confronted with. And it was right when Mark Vargo first became state's attorney, and it was the murder of Dickie Mashik. Mm-hmm. And it was a really unique situation because Dickie Mashik ran video surveillance in every aspect of his entire home. And he was murdered in his home. He was shot in the head. He was executed by a woman. And ultimately, we did not charge that case. We found that the woman that killed him had acted in self-defense. And it was very high profile because it initially absolutely did not seem like self-defense. She was sitting knee to knee with him, and she shot him in the head right between the eyes. And seeing that situation, how could that possibly be self-defense? Mm-hmm. But if you research that case, and I'd love to come back on and talk to it in more detail, we ultimately hired a world-renowned psychiatrist named Park Dietz. He did Jeffrey Dahmer. He's done a number of very high-profile psychiatric court forensic cases. And I told Mark Vargo, I said, we need the very best expert to understand this situation, because as we started watching the video surveillance that was running 24 hours in his house, we began to learn about what had really happened leading up to the death. And Park Dietz, when I called him and told him that I had this whole situation on video, he's like, I'm in. This is a very unique situation. I'm in. And when we learned about what had happened to this woman, whose name I won't say because she's still in community, what had happened to her leading up to the shooting, seeing what she saw and knowing what she knew, even though she had the gun in that moment, she reasonably believed she could not ever make it out alive and could never be away from and safe from him. And your situation to me sounds so much like that. Knowing what she knew and seeing what she saw, she was never going to be free or safe from that person.
Right.
And that's self-defense.
So the prosecution, of course, thinks that there are signs of premeditation. She wasn't there, yet she called him to send for her. She had a gun in her purse. She knew what was going to happen, having been involved with this man in this capacity for a year. So I can see that.
That was their argument.
That was their argument, yeah. So this was a 6-year battle. A Washington Post investigation showed that the Kenosha Police Department knew he was abusing underage black girls for nearly 3 months before his death. And after a 15-year-old black girl fled from his home in nothing but a bra and jacket, police raided his residence and found hundreds of videos of child sexual abuse material. Ugh. And among the stash were videos he'd made of Crystal and other girls who appeared to be as young as 12 years old. But as the investigation continued, police and prosecutors allowed this man to remain free. So does that change?
It just affirms what I've said. I think that just builds the case for her, and I would think that her defense team would argue for that evidence to be introduced into that case, because if she knew that, if she had personal knowledge of the other crimes that he was committing, that would feed into her psychology of why she acted the way that she did, which feeds into her self-defense.
Okay. Here's the next twist.
I can't believe I sound like a defense attorney.
Well, here's the next twist.
But you have to understand that, justice is justice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you have to be able to see it from both sides.
Absolutely.
Or nothing's going to work, right? So one of the prosecutors asserted that Crystal sought help from Volar the night she killed him under false pretenses, and they cited her texts and social media messages as evidence of her plan, including one text she sent from his home on the night of the murder and said that I'm finna do it.
Ooh.
That doesn't look good for her.
That's a twist.
Yeah, it is a twist. Prosecutors play to the jury's sympathy for him, obviously, and while acknowledging that he'd committed a felony each time he trafficked Kaiser, they said that he had dealt with the challenges of a physical deformity in his hands and legs and was naive and socially awkward. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that doesn't play with me.
No, if I were in the jury box, I would have visibly been disgusted. Like, that is no excuse. No excuse.
I wish our listeners could have seen that face right there that you just made.
That was a really ugly face.
It was.
Yes. So likewise, Crystal had endured a difficult childhood, right? She suffered sexual abuse and poverty even before meeting him and being subsequently abused by him. She said, again, she used that money that he gave her to buy food and other supplies for her siblings. Volar's family did not speak in court, but his father submitted a letter to the judge imploring him to show Kaiser no leniency. I'm like,
you raised a scumbag.
Yeah, you can go to jail too. Like, he's dead, so why don't you go on his behalf? I just think that's really crappy. So the last thing I'll say is Sarah Benson, the director of policy strategy for the anti-trafficking nonprofit organization called Shared Hope International, said that Crystal's response after the shooting and the way her story initially changed are consistent with how trauma victims behave. So they did bring in those expert witnesses. She said a person who has experienced trauma such as sexual abuse searches for control any way they know how. We hear this all the time, and their reactions can seem callous. And like Kaiser's decision to burn his house down and take his car. So have you seen anything like that where it's like, okay, the threat has now been eliminated and I am just going to, like, this person has hurt me so much, that taking their life or getting back at them in this way is not enough. I need to do more. Have you seen things like that?
Absolutely. Even just in that case I was talking to you about with the death of Dickie Mashik after this woman killed him in self-defense, I believe in self-defense, she took a bunch of money and property from his house when she left.
Okay.
And we see it in domestic violence victims all the time when they'll get protection orders. Mm-hmm. They're scared. They get protection orders. The protection orders are valid, but then they'll contact the person they just got the protection order against. It's like, why are they doing that? Well, because they got a little power back, so they're going to poke the bear a little bit because they feel safe. So psychologically, they're like, am I safe? I'm going to poke the bear a little bit and see if I'm still safe. It's very common.
Huh. I have never heard that.
That kind of makes sense, though. Like when you have had your power taken away for so long, and like in my dream, like pinch me, right? Is this real? If I do, can I actually be myself, or can I finally say the things I wanted to say that I didn't have the power to say before or do before?
Can they get in trouble though?
Never. Nope. They can never be in trouble for violating that order.
Only the person the order's against.
Only the person the order's against.
Oh, interesting.
But
I learned something new today.
Yeah, but when I train law enforcement officers, which I was just at the academy last week training them, I said, talk to those people and say, you got this order for a reason.
Yeah.
Don't undermine its credibility by contacting that person. I understand why you're doing it.
Yeah.
But just
Have you ever seen a protection order backfire in that way, where the victim who gets it instated ends up doing something where it ends up weakening its purpose?
Absolutely. Then the person that's gotten the protection order against them will take them to court and say, look, she doesn't need this. This isn't valid. Right.
Yeah.
And then the judge,
you've seen them thrown out then?
Right. And then she lacks credibility because how afraid is she if she continues to contact that person?
Interesting. Interesting.
Which is fair.
It is fair.
It is fair.
Yeah. So don't do that. If you have a protection order and you're listening, don't contact the person you got the protection order against.
Yeah.
You
Do
got it for a reason.
favor.
Do yourself a
Yes.
favor.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, here's how the judge ended it when he was sentencing Crystal. The court is well aware of your circumstances surrounding your relationship with Mr. Villar. You are not permitted to be the instrument of his reckoning. To hold otherwise is to endorse a descent into lawlessness and chaos.
So,
But 11 years.
Yeah, I agree. Playing devil's advocate, though, we don't want people taking the law in their own hands most of the time, with very few exceptions. Maybe this is the exception because he had been investigated for things and obviously wasn't being held accountable for those things. So I feel like that makes it a little bit different, but I do get where the judge is coming from too. Like, we don't just as individuals get to decide somebody's fate, or we shouldn't get to.
Yeah, I get that.
But I agree with if you think you're never going to be safe. And I feel like that's a very good example. I'm terrible at this because I'm always going to be the person in the middle, right? Because I always see both sides of like even horrible things. I'm like, well, but yeah.
I wonder, have you ever seen where, like in this case, I'm trying to remember a case and it was so long ago that I researched it, not for this podcast, many years ago. But there was a case where a girl ended up, I think this was in the LA area, and she was clearly having some type of mental health break. I cannot remember her name. But again, a black girl in a very affluent area. She'd been at a fancy restaurant, walked out on a bill that she couldn't pay, but was in clear signs of mental distress, like almost disassociated with reality. Got picked up because of this, put in jail, and was let go to nobody. And then she disappeared and they found her body later. So like similar situation where if they had held her for her safety, because she's clearly in some kind of mental state that is not healthy or safe for her,
might not have
happened. And in this case, if they had held this shitbag, then he probably would be alive.
Yeah.
And his house wouldn't have been burned down, and Crystal wouldn't be serving 11 years in prison, like adding insult to injury to all of the abuse and trauma that she endured. Like, have you ever seen that where the system gets held accountable for playing a role in this because they seem to have been factored out of this situation as far as my research could show. And I thought, well, they did have a role to play.
I can't think of an example, certainly nothing as egregious as that, but it is a really good example of how important it is that we be immediately responsive and how crucial it is that we act in these situations. And, I get so nervous about the fact that state's attorney's office is understaffed. Law enforcement is short officers. We don't have enough resources, and there's just so much need. Again, we were at that vigil last night, and there's people there whose loved ones are missing. Mm-hmm. There's people in our community that are missing right now that we're looking for, that we're searching for, and there's that constant feeling that law enforcement, which I'm very much part of, are just not doing enough, but.
And it's not
we're
for
doing
lack
all we
of
can.
wanting
exactly.
do enough.
Yes, I just hope the community knows that we're doing all we can with what we have.
Well, being married to one, I see what they go through and, his friends and just staying up all night, turning over every rock and taking it as if it were their own family member or friend that they're trying to find.
Yeah, I can't speak for that community's failures, but I can speak from my heart about this community, and we are so blessed in that you really do have a police department and a sheriff's office and a state's attorney's office that work together truly as hard as they can in the community's best interest.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll lighten things up when we come back on the EscapePod. Hello, escape artists out there. Quick public service announcement. You hear us talk on the EscapePod about the One Heart campus. To learn more about this place for hope and healing where lives are changed for the better, listen to the prologue episode at escapepod.live or wherever you get your podcasts, or visit oneheartrc.org.
Okay.
That is horrifying.
And 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to the EscapePod. We actually have Julie in a speechless state right now. We won't talk about what we were talking about while we were off air, but this was a very sanitized version of the things that Laura Retzel has experienced in her career.
I
think she's going to vomit.
Right. I am always kind of like, there's not a lot. I did news for a while. I sat in a courtroom with horrible criminal cases. Like I've experienced as an observer more than I would like in life. And you actually did leave me speechless for maybe the first time in a long time.
Both a little pale and flushed at the same time. That's an interesting look.
On that note,
what are you escaping, Julie?
Lighten it up, please.
What are you trying to escape this week?
Well, I am escaping to, I hope, the chiropractor tomorrow. Yay, because my neck needs a good hi-ya.
A hi-ya?
Yes. I've had terrible neck and it's like radiating down my shoulder and my arm and whatever. So here's hoping that she can fix it. That's the goal. So escaping to the chiropractor by this time tomorrow. I hope I'm feeling much better.
How about you, Laura? What are you escaping to?
Escaping to
something fun, like someplace you'd actually like to be. It doesn't have to be a place. It can be a mindset. It can be a book.
It could be a bottle of wine.
I would like to escape to a world where people only say nice things on social media.
That's funny, too.
What button do you have for that, Julie?
Jeez.
I love that idea. I just stay off of social media because it is the worst of humanity. It quite honestly is.
Yeah.
I need to stop.
And in your role,
Agree.
you can't ignore it. I mean, but you could pay somebody to read that for you, right?
Yeah, I need to stop.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's okay.
I feel it.
I've been there. I'm still there. In our community, for whatever reason, I mean, I've been out of public office for 7 years and people still see me as that. So I get the same type of treatment that you do, and I don't think that's ever going to end, and it wears on you.
Mm-hmm. It does.
It really does.
Okay. So stay off social media. Okay. Give yourself solid 24 hours.
Got it.
Charity, you're up.
I'm up. I'm really trying to find a happy place right now. It has been a very, very crappy year, week. It's been one gut punch after another. We were talking offline about how these like emotional roller coaster of, oh my God, there's hope. This is actually going to work out. And then gut punch and it's just like brutalized. And I'm like, I think it's the swings. I don't know if I can take any. I need level.
Yeah.
So I would love to escape to something just level and predictable and non-plussing. Like that'd just be amazing to just, I'm not going to like get punched in the teeth today. That'd be fantastic.
Like it might be a little boring, but we would like boring sometimes.
Boring would be good.
Boring would be good.
Yeah.
Well, Lara, thank you for coming back.
Yes, you are one
So
of our
welcome.
favorites. This is fantastic.
Very limited time for any kind of fun. So we hope you had just a little bit of fun with us.
So much fun.
In the Escape Pod. Folks at home or wherever you're listening, please follow, rate, review, subscribe. You can become a patron by going to escapepod.live. The website will allow you to become a patron. Follow us on our socials. Reach out at justbecaus at escapepod.live or share your story of escape at escapeartist at escapepod.live.
Yeah, and remember, there are not very many podcasts for a cause that
Yes.
I've seen out there. So we're trying to entertain. We're also trying to spread awareness for a larger mission here. Again, now that we did get to turn on monetization, so thank you all that helped us carry that across the finish line. That was exciting.
Yeah.
What have we made so far? A whole 52 cents or something like that.
Listen.
Woo! Do you have your applause
every penny
button?
counts.
Yay! But it is exciting. It shows growth, and that's always exciting to see validation of your hard work like actually paying off. So we just appreciate you all so much, and we love the emails, whether they're stories or not. We love them, so keep those going. But just thank you. Help us gain more exposure and really grow this into something we love and support all of you. So
We are closing the hatch on this episode of the Escape Pod. Remember, trauma may be inevitable. How you grapple with it is optional.
do your best to stay resilient.
And do your best to keep laughing.
Thank you, everybody.